Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining me today on this Wednesday right after lunch, excuse me, Tuesday right after lunch. And I'm going to talk to you today about planning without numbers. And what does that mean for you? I'm a certified financial advisor and have been in the business for over 17 years. I find that planning is the key and ultimate piece to anybody's financial future and journey. So what does that look like and where did I start? Well, I started about over 21 years ago on my financial journey when I met with my advisor. I had $1,500 in cash and lots of student debt. And my advisor met with me at least once or twice a year to focus on my goals and help me map out what I wanted to accomplish. She was able to help me focus on paying down my debt and putting enough aside to have my first home purchase. I was so grateful for her. I actually got into the business, and I feel that was so critical and important for myself that I wanted to do it for everyone else. And so for the last 17 years, I've seen a lot and experienced a lot. 2 children as well along the way, 2 market downturns. I'm still here and I love what I do. So I hope to share with you some insights on how you can get started on your financial journey as well. And I think this is the time right now for women to take those first steps for their financial success. We've had the Me Too movement, and COVID just recently, I think, has given people a lot of time to think about what it is that they want in life and give them some sort of direction and guidance on taking the first steps. So hopefully today, with this next 2 days, you're able to find some tidbits that will help you get started. So I'm going to talk briefly about what are some of the mental barriers women are facing these days when it comes to money. I'm sure you might have already heard it just previously, but I will have my own take on that, why you should get involved in financial planning, and what's the value of that advice. And most importantly, what are the 6 aspects that you need to consider when working with an advisor and talking about your financial future. And lastly, I'm going to share with you what your happiness portfolio should look like. So I've been finding that women tend to not really have the confidence to make financial decisions for various reasons. It's one of those things that we've just never talk about. It is something we don't learn in school. And a lot of women are just nervous for making mistakes. And I hope that you can at least maybe look at some of these and say, yeah, that's actually me and I'm feeling that way. And to try and take that as a first step towards completing your financial goals. There are lots of acronyms in our business. It can be very confusing. And one of the things that I found that helped me when I started way back 21 years ago was reading The Wealthy Barber. So finding a book that keeps things simple and explains it a little bit more clearly will also help you. Procrastination is our #1 problem. So I want people to understand that just start today. Start now with something small and make it a habit and continue building on that over time. But one of the ones I really want to talk about is this giving up control. And I think women, perhaps when they're younger, they do have control over their financial future. But when we get married or meet our partner and have children, other things take priority. And a lot of people just say, you know what, I'm just going to pass it to my partner and let them take care of it because I really don't have time. And that's pretty much true. We don't. At the end of the day, when you're exhausted, is probably when you start thinking about money. So giving up control can have a big impact on you. And I'm hoping that people will start taking the lead in doing so. I recently had somebody approach me after attending my 3-part women's series workshop I had in the spring. And she mentioned to me that her and her husband had just sold their cottage. She was dealing with a lot of anxiety around it because she had no knowledge of what was going on with their finances. She let him take care of everything. And once the cottage was sold, he basically had a number of ideas of what they were going to do with the money. But she felt half of that was hers, and therefore she should also have some influence. After talking to her and meeting with her, she realized that she needed to have some confidence in having these discussions with him. And it really was difficult for her to have the discussions, but she learned what she needed to know. I guided her on what she needed to ask. And at the end of the day, they were able to resolve some of their issues, and she was taking control of her finances. And she felt pretty good about it. And that was really part of the financial planning process that we worked on together. We talked about her goals and what she wanted to have happen with this money when she received it. And we put it in writing. and really worked through all the different financial situations that they had. What was their mortgage? What was their cash flow? And what were their current investments? And I came up with some strategies for her in order to help her reach those goals. And at the end of the day, she was very grateful that we were able to arm her with some really good tips on how to have a conversation with her spouse. And you really can't do this alone. I think it's important that you find somebody that you can work with, that you trust, that will help you get through those difficult times or that difficult conversation. And that's the value of advice. Ipsos Reid did a study in Canada, and they looked at people across the country. So from east to west coast, they asked them very simple questions. How much money do they have? How much money do they make? Their age, and do they work with an advisor or not? And in this particular slide, what they found was no matter how much money you made, you always had more investable assets than someone not working with an advisor. And you might say, well, maybe the older people had more money. But in this particular slide, again, it didn't matter how old you were, you always had more investable assets when working with an advisor. And the advisor is the blue bars. Really, what we're there for is to help you get through those tough times, to talk about what you want, and to help you map it out and provide the best direction and solution for yourself. And I was recently just quoted in the Globe and Mail Globe Advisor article about the she session, they call it, and the pandemic that recently just happened. And at the very bottom, I actually felt that a lot of my clients and I just talked. We were just talking about what they were dealing with, what was going on in their lives. And I was able to help them stay motivated and focused on their current situation. And really, sometimes I'm just a coach. I'm just there to help them get through some difficult times, but also through good times too. And that's why I love what I do. So when you are working with an advisor, what are the 6 pillars of financial planning that you must consider? I often meet people who say, oh, I just had somebody and they just talked about my investments and how much I wanted to put aside. But really, that's just one part or 1/6 of what you need to consider when talking about financial planning. I mean, really, it's a written plan. You are the center of it all, but these are the different areas that you should be asking about or focusing on with your advisor. So cash management is number 1. I say that's always your base. What's coming in and what's going out and what's left over at the end of the day. And if there's not a lot left over, then what are the areas that we need to look at or consider to free up some cash flow? Investments obviously are a great component and something I'm not going to chat about today. There's other great speakers talking about that today, but really it fuels your plan, but it's only 1/6 of the plan. How can we save more taxes? Very important. Putting more money back in your pocket rather than the government's pocket. Insurance or risk management is another area to consider. I'm going to talk briefly about that in a little bit, as well as estate planning. So what's going to happen at the end of the day if you're no longer here? And last but not least, retirement. And what does that look like for you? These all deal with numbers and they don't deal with numbers. And that's what I'm going to talk a bit more about. When talking about investments, as I said before, there's lots of advisors out there that just focus on that. But I find sometimes my biggest area of focus is dealing with the emotions people have regarding investing. And, just recently we had a downturn in March. But prior to that, things were going really well. And I find when investments are growing and people are hearing that markets are up, they're very confident. They want to maybe take on more risk. I get that a lot of times. But I often say you want to make sure you can sleep at night because you get excited. You want to go with the upswing on the markets, or this is the hottest thing, I want to invest. But then when markets do go down, people get nervous, they freak out, they call me, they want to sell. And that is really the worst time to be doing that. And so a lot of times I'm just managing people's emotion when the markets are up and when the markets are down. But we have to understand that this is a long-term strategy for the most part, and that we're going to go through this quite often throughout your lifetime. Another thing that I like to talk to clients about in regards to financial planning is risk management and protecting your biggest asset. What is your biggest asset? It's not your house. It's not your investments. It's you. You are your biggest asset. Your ability to earn an income, to make money, and save money. And are you protecting yourself from whatever may come your way? It's the what ifs. What if you are unable to do your job tomorrow? Do you know what your disability plan, if you have a company plan, offers you? If you're self-employed, do you have any coverage in place? The number one reason there's mortgage defaults is people becoming sick or disabled. There's not enough income coming in. EI isn't going to cover it for you. So what are the ways that you can protect yourself from earning a living if something should happen? Critical illness is another area that you might want to consider. If there's a heart attack, cancer, or stroke, this can pay out a lump sum tax-free to yourself to do what you wish to do. And I believe somebody's going to be talking about some living benefits later on in the day. Life insurance can also be a way of protecting yourself and your family. So there are many different strategies depending on what stage you are in life and what type of protection you want to consider for those different strategies, but definitely something to not overlook as part of your financial plan. Another area I want to focus on is something that's most often overlooked by financial advisors and near and dear to my heart. But before I start, I want to show you a few pictures of some famous people. So Abraham Lincoln, Martin Luther King, Pablo Picasso, Sonny, Michael Jackson, Prince, Aretha Franklin, and Amy Winehouse. Does anyone know what they all have in common? You might not be able to come up with an idea. They are famous. That's probably the one thing that they have in common. However, they all died intestate, meaning they all died without a will. Surprised? I know I was when I saw this slide. And what we're really trying to say is no matter what, you can be famous, lots of money, dying without a will is very important because what happens is it leaves you with a bit of a mess for your beneficiaries. Pablo Picasso, for example, his beneficiaries took 6 years to settle his estate and cost them over $30 million. That may not be your situation, but there can be a lot of things to have to go through in order to settle someone's estate. So have you gotten a will done? Or have you had powers and attorneys in place? 50% of the Canadian population does not. It's really important, especially if you have children or family members dependent on you for your income and for your ability to take care of them. I will be presenting a webinar next week, Tuesday, November 23rd at 4 p.m. It is in the profile I have to register. So if you're interested in learning more about that, I will be hosting one next week. And also in my profile is the preparedness tool that you can use to gather all the data that you need to present to a lawyer to go through and get your wills and powers of attorney completed. So having the conversations is important. And I recently have met with a client, new client to me, and in our conversations together, he was talking about how he sold his business a few years ago. He just married his second wife. He has children from his previous marriage. He's retired and really just is trying to figure out what's next. And he has 2 advisors currently. And I said to him, I would be the third, but have you talked about estate planning with your advisors? And he's like, no, I've talked about my estate with my lawyer, but that's as far as it went. So in further conversation with him, we discussed things like who's going to get what? You've got a new wife. Are your children going to be upset if she gets most of the assets? Do you have beneficiaries assigned? Who are they? What is the tax consequences if something happens to you? And who's going to be having to look after that? So lots of discussions around estate planning can be very important in providing direction and guidance, and everyone's wishes are met. And the last piece of wanted to talk about is this concept of the happiness portfolio. So in talking about retirement, we often say, how much money do you need to live on every year? How much do you need to have at retirement to last, let's say, 30 years? And those are great things to talk about. But what we're finding is that when people actually retire, they go through this honeymoon phase. They're excited and they're happy. They get to do all these things that they want to do, sleep in, have lunch whenever they want. And yet after a certain period of time, they find that they're a bit stuck. What's next? What else do I have to do? Maybe I should go back to work. I'm bored. There's lots of things that haven't been unearthed and haven't been talked about. And this is what I wanted to share with you. We're now looking at retirement as a bit more than just numbers. It's about creating that vision and plan on how you can be happy for the next 30 years of your life. And these are the 8 asset classes that we need to discuss. So if you're working, what are you going to do after you're done working? A lot of professionals have a hard time with retirement. It's actually been shown 2/3 of professionals have a hard time transitioning into retirement, and they find they continue to work or work part-time. So is that something that you're going to do? Have you thought about that? Another piece of conversation I have with a lot of clients is, what am I going to do if my spouse is around? That seems a bit scary. What are we going to talk about? What are we going to do together or not together? And having those conversations around your primary relationships and what is expected of each one of you, or what you're going to do together. And then talk about your family and friends. Are you meeting your friends every day for lunch? Once a week for lunch? Are you getting together with them? Are you looking after your grandchildren? What does that piece look like for you? And what about giving back? A lot of people want to volunteer in retirement, perhaps set up charitable giving foundations. And so what is that going to look like in your retirement? And are you going to have any spiritual or emotional well-being that you want to map out? Do you want to take courses during this time? Do you want to continue to learn, to grow as a person? And then obviously most people relate retirement to leisure. You know, they have visions of golfing every day. They have dreams of traveling, and that's fantastic. But again, what does that look like? And what are you planning on doing? I heard a story that people who golf, they love it at the beginning, but then it turns into a very angry stage later on because they're just trying to always beat the next golf game is to beat their score from the previous time. Self-development is also critical to be happy. Are you going to continue to take courses to improve yourself? And then also talk about health and aging. Do you want to have somebody come into your home if you're unable to look after yourself? Are we talking about going into retirement home? I just recently had a client talk to their parents about retirement homes. They're still fairly young, active, healthy, but they actually went to a retirement home to visit it, just to get an idea of what it's going to look like, to make sure the family is aware of what you want to have happen. So I think this is something that's going to be taking control over our next stage of discussion, and should also be part of your financial plan. So I think today, this is the day that everything changes. Take control of your financial life, have a written financial plan and a happiness portfolio, and feel great about it. A plan doesn't limit your freedom. It actually gives you freedom. So I want to thank you for joining me today. Hopefully I've given you a little bit of insight on what financial planning should be without numbers. I am available for a 1-hour consultation for anyone who's interested. There's a Calendly link here that you can just go and click and book a time that suits you. Always available for questions, email, and I am appreciative that you had the time today to join us, and enjoy the rest of the conference.